Minister, disabled people have been failed by this government. In your record £9.4 billion budget, developers and fast food chains were prioritised. They were handed tax breaks, which will cost the state nearly €5 billion over the next 4 years. To help pay for that, the income of disabled people were slashed. According to the Disability Federation of Ireland, people's allowances have been reduced by €1,400. This is devastating for so many people who are barely scraping by. Minister, successive governments have ignored the rights of disabled people, but their treatment by this government feels particularly cruel. That's why so many people are protesting outside the Dáil today, because they feel betrayed. Both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach promised during the election that disabled people would be prioritised. But at the first available opportunity, those commitments were abandoned. This government seems to think income supports for disabled people were somehow optional, because they were cut to the bone. Minister, we've heard a lot from this government about the need to target resources at those who need them most. That was apparently the guiding principle behind this budget. That's a nice soundbite, but doesn't stand up to any scrutiny, because we know that huge numbers of disabled people are living in poverty. Every day, people are struggling, not just with the soaring costs that we all face in energy and food and housing, but with the enormous additional cost of having a disability. Which is why a weekly cost of disability payment is precisely the kind of support that you should be prioritising. But instead of doing that, the government did the opposite and actually reduced people's incomes, pushing them even further into poverty. Minister, one of the many payments in your pre-election giveaway budget was a one-off cost of disability payment. A one-off payment for an everyday cost was obviously insulting enough. But then, incredibly, your government abolished the payment entirely and didn't replace it with anything, as if the costs of having a disability somehow disappeared overnight. It's not the first time that targeted supports for disability have been removed at the stroke of a pen. In 2013, personal transport grants for disabled people were abolished. At the time, the Fine Gael Labour government said they would replace it immediately, and more than a decade later, there's still no sign of it. Minister, the people protesting today are telling you how they feel about the litany of broken promises, how they feel about consistently being failed, how they feel about their government slashing their income by €1,400 in the middle of a cost of living crisis. The question is, are you going to listen to them, and are you going to act? Minister, these cuts were callous and cruel, and they should be reversed.
To respond.
Will you introduce a winter payment for disabled people, and will you finally introduce a permanent cost of disability payment?
Thank you very much, Deputy Cairns. And what I'd say, the Taoiseach chaired the first meeting of the Delivery and Monitoring Committee for the National Human Rights Strategy for Disabled People, where we're obviously trying to work on a series of actions to make sure we have a step change in the provision of disability services over the lifetime of this government. And I think Budget 2026 was the first opportunity to show our commitment to this strategy. And if you look at the funding achieved by Minister Foley in the context of the disability budget, a 20% increase in funding was secured, which will deliver stronger mainstream services and also targeted social protection supports for households with disabilities. The strategy is our roadmap to 2030 and sets out a series of measures which will be led from the Department of the Taoiseach. And you've asked about social protection in particular, and that's why, as part of the overall budgetary allocation, a €10 increase in weekly social welfare rates was progressed in Budget 2026. We've also progressed the highest ever increases to the child support payment, a €20 increase in the domiciliary care allowance, a €5 increase in the fuel allowance, and people moving from disability allowance or blind pension into work will also retain their fuel allowance for 5 years, and where relevant will now qualify for the back to work family dividend. The earnings disregard for carers allowance will rise in July 2026. So we've taken a number of measures in terms of the social protection package to support people with disabilities. We've also expanded in terms of the wage subsidy scheme from April 2026, and we've taken a number of measures as well, as I've said, in terms of fuel allowance. In terms of the education system, €3 billion is being allocated to special education for children with additional needs. So across the education system, social protection, the transport system as well. Minister O'Brien has advanced measures in terms of the €25 million being allocated. There's 25 million is allocated for accessibility improvements. We've the disabled drivers and passenger scheme is being increased, and a co-designed new scheme from next year will make more people eligible. So we've taken a number of steps across multiple departments to try and improve the day-to-day experience for people living with disabilities. But central to that has been the funding secured by Minister Foley, and specifically for her budget, to ramp up the level of intervention we make in terms of service provision, and that was reflected in the work programme and the work that will happen next year in terms of the overall level of supports in terms of service provision for people with disabilities. Obviously the work is ongoing in terms of budgetary provision for next year around social protection package, and we'll consider, obviously with engagement with everyone in the disability sector,
Thank you, Minister.
Further requests around different support payments. We have to take the social protection
Deputy
package
Cairns.
in the round, and we did increase core welfare rates
Deputy
significantly
Cairns.
this year.
So you're saying that there's a committee to start looking at schemes, and I just want to highlight the fact that there has been committee after committee after committee on disability. There's been report after report after report, and they all have the same findings. There is a huge added cost to having a disability. We know that people with disabilities in Ireland are living in consistent poverty above and beyond other European countries. We know that you have a lower chance of being employed as a disabled person in this country. You've had all the committees and the reports that you need, and people are outside there protesting today to tell you they just need action now. They don't need another committee or another report. They don't need to wait until your next budget. There's a cost of living crisis now. Disabled people were already disproportionately living in poverty, and now their payments have been cut. I'm going to ask you the two questions that I asked you initially again. Will you introduce an emergency winter disability payment, and will you finally introduce a permanent cost of disability payment?
Thank you, Deputy.
Your last budget before this one recognised the cost of disability.
Minister,
now you've
to
abandoned
respond.
it. So I reject your assertion that we've had committees there and no action has been taken. That's actually untrue. If you think of the 20% increase in funding for the Department of Disability, the work that Minister Foley is now doing with the HSE and a new service plan will provide a significant improvement in terms of the state's response to improve disability services in 2026. A record level of funding to support people with disabilities. When it comes to the Department of Social Protection, as I've said, we introduced a series of measures around the fuel allowance, around improving core welfare rates, increasing the domiciliary care allowance, and also the back to work family dividend as well. We've been clear that the budget we've agreed for 2026 is the settled allocation for next year. Of course, we'll engage with everyone across and all the stakeholders involved around budget 2027, and that will be considered as part of next year's budget. But the payments you referenced were one-off measures taken in previous years, and we were clear in how we developed budget 2026 that measures we would take had to be permanent, sustainable and affordable, and we made a significant intervention in terms of the social protection package.
Deputy Charles Ward.